Do you ever engage with something that immediately makes you think, this might be the best thing I've ever played? Leap Year did that for me. The kind of experience that makes you utter with alarming regularity, I didn't know I could do that. A game that constantly surprised me throughout its modest runtime and then continued to surprise me further. Leap Year is a game with an inspired central conceit. You can jump wherever you want, but where you land is the difference between life and death. One block too high and it's curtains for you, little man. Another couple more and, well, I don't want to spoil too much. It's a brilliant mix of clear-cut instructions clashing cartoonishly with a world that requires almost exclusively leaps of faith. While the rules that govern the spaces you navigate are set in stone, the stone in question is weather-faded and cracked in half. There are layers of obfuscation laid over the layers of obfuscation. The spaces you navigate seem impossible at first glance, especially when littered ambitiously with the pages of this cosmic calendar in areas that it really doesn't seem like you'd be able to get into, but that's where the game gets you. With time, a keen eye and a hell of a lot of trial and error, you will find the path forward. Not taught to you, but an experientially fostered understanding that evolves over time. You will come to understand the weird, crooked ways of these lands, and more importantly, what gravity actually means to you. What you can do when you cover your eyes and push forward into the abyss. How the ground beneath your feet, once your mortal nemesis, will eventually become your dutiful servant. What results is a rare ludic experience where the world ends up being simultaneously a stage for a series of very clever navigation puzzles, a game mechanic in itself, and a control scheme of sorts. That last point might be a little hard to visualize if you've not played this, but it makes sense when you're holding the reins. Platforms, obstacles, and hazards feel like an extension of the player's abilities, a guide in one hand and a tool in the other. A platformer that genuinely elevates the genre to new heights, Leap Year is built by a designer who has clearly really thought about what makes this sort of game tick, and in turn has created one of the most inventive, pure, and genuinely exciting experiences I've had in years. Cat people and highwaymen trapped in an eternal conflict in the bowels of an infinitely oppressive megastructure. Your weapons are futile, your ammunition is sparse, your body is at risk of decimation. There is no way out, there is no choice but to fight. Metal Garden is a traditional first-person shooter that feels anything but. Each level is generously sprawling, kitted out with multiple pathways, almost all of which contain delicious secrets and scarce resources to bolster your odds for survival, which you will need because those odds are extremely slim. A challenging experience, but not in that brutally difficult sense that you have to be the master of your own body. Rather, combat, or specifically the consequences of your choices in combat, have to be considered. There's no going in blind here. The game regularly gives you scope for reconnaissance in these skirmishes, a means of getting the jump on an unsuspecting foe or two, but never has the upper hand felt so transient than in this space, especially when your enemies have the opportunity to get the jump on you too. Every fight feels rough, chaotic, and with all parties scrambling to come out on top. The limitations of your weapons, how much damage the enemy can inflict on you, and the sly juxtaposition of vast open spaces and claustrophobic halls all contribute to this oppressive sensation that makes every encounter feel like a desperate fight to the death, even though in reality it usually isn't. Checkpoints are suitably generous. I never fully ran out of resources, and although I spent long stretches of the game impaired by this unique locational damage mechanic that you don't always have the means to heal from, I still found my way through. Sometimes good optics grant you a better sense of satisfaction without the frustration of running up against a brick wall. The star of the show with Metal Garden, however, is its world, a beautifully violent clash of concrete monstrosities and verdant horizons. It is so evocative of the state of nature in a man-made world, where plant life always blooms while the edifice of civilization inevitably crumbles. Incidentally, I've just moved house and the amount of weeding I have to do is unfathomable. For the cost of entry, I think this is a remarkably generous game, but at the same time as I reached its conclusion, I was still hungry. That's the magic of it though. It invites the sensation of there being more to explore, secrets to encounter, and layers of world building to uncover along the way. Economic in its design but wholeheartedly ambitious all the same, Metal Garden is a true sleeper hit, a title in desperate need of more eyes upon it. I don't really know how to explain Navicula Meatus to you, but I do know that this is one of the most fascinatingly odd and genuinely inventive adventure games I've ever played. But it is really difficult to see that at first. The presentation is off-putting, the text is not in a language you will understand, just getting off the main menu is a task and a half, and the game sports a rather fiddly control scheme that I still find myself struggling with to this day. On top of this, the symbology that defines this world's baffling economy will make you retch. It's a space governed by fleshy monstrosities coveting equally vile forms of commerce. Almost everything you come across is an orifice of sorts, hence the game's title. Once you've ingratiated yourself into it a bit, however, what actually goes on in this bizarre, messed up version of Sesame Street is a little more conventional than it first appears. Essentially, you are engaging in a Byzantine series of fetch quests, grabbing up items to give to the wayward denizens of this fleshy municipality in exchange for something their equally hideous neighbours desire. A sequence of grunts and shrieks tell you nothing, but a vague, low-resolution image of an ill-defined shape will let you know what they are after. And maybe you'll have that, but you probably won't, and the meat of this game comes down to figuring out the exact sequence of trades needed to gain access to... well, it's hard to say. The path forward is never crystal clear. However, the process of following the links in this chain will draw you to a conclusion of sorts. It all culminates in, well, an even more unusual epilogue that itself I'm certain holds secrets, because I'm convinced that the game is not just the game. There may be elements to be found in this weird and wonderful world that's pushed the story ever outwards along new strands, should the right choices be made. The game's trailer shows me things I didn't see during my playthrough, as well as dialogue presented in English, suggesting to me that there is another layer of narrative, puzzle, or both to be uncovered here. For a fiver, Navicula Meatus is a wonderful curiosity. Depraved without feeling exploitative, disgusting without being truly unpleasant. It's like a video game adaptation of Phil Tippett's Mad God mixed up with the whimsical stylings of Cosmo D's Off-Peak series. Where else can you find eldritch horrors and chain-smoking catgirls in the same part of town? Okay, I promise you that I'm not being some contrarian dickhead when I say that I think this might be the best looking game I've ever played. I know, a huge blow for nominative determinism, but let me explain. Cape Hideous is a point-and-click adventure game that is entirely wordless, and the way it gets around this is nothing short of magical. While far from directionless, the game's visual language is so strangely understated. A collage of pensive looks, fabrics blowing in the wind, NPCs doing a spot of creative blocking, and an oddly intuitive sense that you're taking the right steps, even when you're never quite sure what's going on. So rich is Cape Hideous's visual language that not once did I find myself mentally adrift at where to go or what to do next, a quirk of the genre that always seemed evergreen. It goes with the territory, or so I thought. As it transpires, you don't need intentional obfuscation or bizarre dream logic, you just need a designer who trusts in their own process, who can tell a story without telling a story, who can build a world without building a world. Greater still is the sense of awe that Cape Hideous draws from small details, little bespoke animations. Well, it's all bespoke. Ornate is perhaps the better word. There are flourishes to be found here that I genuinely do not see even in bigger budget titles. While seemingly the decadent act of an artist who had full control over the project, these smaller elements go on to direct the player in ways that cannot be overstated. Visual and animated touches that incept the idea of direction into your mind, everything a grounded sense of immersion and at the same time a guidestone for your continued progression throughout this brief, impactful story. There's no getting away from the fact that this thing was made by hand. It looks like it was crafted in MS Paint. It probably was. That purposeful labour, however, makes its artistry shine ever brighter. Choices were made about what was and was not included within the frame, itself a broadcast about what the game's creator, Jake Clover, considers important. It takes time to put those extra details in, a no doubt painstaking process, and the additions are imbued all the more with that sense of intent. And that, my friends, is why I think this is the best looking game I've ever played. It says a lot that out of every entry in this video, Cape Hideous is the shortest. It's about half an hour long, and yet it's the one that has stayed with me the most. A striking, artistically specific act of cultural generosity that I really urge everyone to dedicate a small amount of time and money to experiencing. Babushka's Glitch Dungeon is exactly what its title suggests. You play a little old lady whose magical cellar has fallen victim to an infestation of digital artifacts, and it's up to you to do the most extreme, out-of-this-world form of spring cleaning known to man. The only problem is, this space just seems to keep getting bigger and more bizarre. Every door leads to more doors, with entire ecosystems to be found within. This game, to me, falls neatly into a similar space as titles like Ultra Nothing, in that it takes a small pool of mechanics and builds outwards using the environment to create the challenge. Navigation is the name of the game, where Granny's latent skills as a witch come in handy, with the ability to swap between various forms of hag magic on the fly in order to negotiate the spaces around you. There is, however, a spanner in the works. Our old dear's memory is not what it once was. She can only remember 2 spells at a time, and even with the greatest intent, some environmental peculiarities will reduce that memory allowance to 0. This, as it turns out, is the secret sauce that makes Babushka's Glitch Dungeon so compelling. Moving through these environments has its own share of spatial resource management anyway, but coupling this with the juggling act of making sure you have the right spell equipped at the right time creates a secondary layer of challenge that is as thrilling to overcome as it is frustrating to fall short of. It is compelling though, even in its more irksome moments. The game world is expansive and unconventional, a sequence of doors leading to outlandish and rapidly sprawling levels, replete with all sorts of nonsense to guide Granny around. Although the path forward is built with that sort of well-intentioned design, no doubt a specific sequence and that sequence alone leading to the correct solution, the game does its damned best to hide the strings on this particular puppet, feeling instead like you, with that small pool of abilities, can do whatever you like to get the result you want. Kind of like an immersive sim, but not really. Babushka's Glitch Dungeon is a great time. I think essential viewing for fans of puzzle games and search action titles alike. For the modest cost of entry, it's a bit of a no-brainer really. Deep in the bowels of Manchester Cathedral there lies a machine, a code breaker, and an archive of lost books, a relic of days gone and a portent for a future seemingly set in stone. Big things are happening above ground, but for you, dear player, the context doesn't matter. All you need to know is that you have a job to do, and that job is finding codes and linking them to their sources. TR49 is the latest game from Inkle, a studio that specialises in interactive narrative experiences, with the emphasis on narrative. And despite its seemingly mechanical nature, this entry is no different. One part archivism simulator, one part radio drama, TR49 is a game that does a hell of a lot with seemingly very little. Put together in 9 months by a team you can count on one hand, there is a focus and precision to this work that I am enduringly impressed by. Drawn in by the initial confusion of its setup, the first thing the game asks you to do is figure out how the hell to even play it. Your means of engaging with this machine are simple. A dial of numbers and letters allows you to experiment with different combinations, the correct ones bringing up new entries in this microfiche-esque library. But not everything is clear from the get-go. You take what little information you can get your hands on and you need to draw some conclusions of your own. What do the letters and numbers refer to? What stories do they tell? Your handler over the radio talks in hushed tones of a world of ruin and of a particular book you need to seek out. But what that book is, why it is important, and what you actually need to do once it's found, these are the answers unravelled slowly over the game's modest runtime, unveiled through conversations over the radio and through notes hidden within the machine by its original handlers. It's a little tricky in places. There's a lot to pay attention to, and I did find myself at times stuck in a loop of checking and rechecking the same bits of information before the golden path eventually unveiled itself to me. But it's all there for you to uncover with time and energy. The game does a great job of keeping track of critical information. The radio drama bits are worth digging deep into, but they never unveil information pertinent to the game's progression that isn't also available elsewhere. Everything you need is written down, the rest is, for want of a better term, nuance. It's all really impressive. A short, sharp, and engaging thriller that touches on themes of familial estrangement, academic obsession, and some loftier big brain ideas that I don't really want to get into for fear of spoiling it for any of you curious to try this out for yourself. And you should. For around a $5 and the course of an evening, I can't think of anything better. Language is a barrier often difficult to breach, but one of its great tragedies is that it hides the truth of the universe, that we have more in common than we ever think. We grow, we learn and love and build up memories of the people in our lives, those enduringly static and those more transient. I mention language because one of the first encounters in Some Goodbyes We Made is wordless, through necessity as much as artistic intent. The minigame, in which you click on icons as they scroll past the windows of a plane taking off, is a sequence of bittersweet memories that accelerate at an alarming rate until you are all but overwhelmed. The experience, a part of a university project by one of the game's co-developers, was designed at a time when they had moved to a new country, learning a language not native to them, but wanting to create an experience that expressed something beyond words. The result is oddly disarming. Some Goodbyes We Made is a series of minigames like this, all developed around the idea of saying farewell as an act rather than a statement. These vignettes are brief but arrestingly poignant, the simplicity of their means of engagement ever willing to catch you off guard with an intangible emotional gut punch or two, made all the more impactful by their proximity to real-life experiences. Each encounter, upon completion, unlocks a diary entry in which the developer explains the real memory they are based on, accounts of a life told through the passage from one moment to the next, through means that aren't quite what you expect, and in a light not always presented in the negative, but still rendering itself in a manner that catches you off guard either way. Loose leaves of an autobiography, or a curated playlist of conscious moments of reflection, but in some bizarre contradiction, the player still has agency over how these accounts are framed, at critical moments presented a choice for how the understanding is focused. This, in itself, a potent artistic decision. One of the powerful things about a work like this is how much it draws on the player's own memories as a form of emotional resonance. I found myself reflecting on the times in my life that I had to say goodbye, the supercharged flashbang relationships I formed in atypical circumstances that could never last, the people I honestly thought I'd see one more time but never did, those I can never return to. Don't be sad that it's over. Be glad that it ever happened in the first place, they say. That sort of vibe, but one that doesn't always bring the level of comfort you desire. It's that moment of reflection that makes you realize the degree to which you are at peace with your choices or not. What I see in some goodbyes we made above anything else is a celebration of life itself. The happy and sad moments mixed together, a reminder that you, as a human being, are not a fixed point in time, and that you are more than the sum of your experiences in life. I've noticed a recent uptick in this particular subgenre in which you have to decipher the very rules of the game as part of, if not the whole, puzzle. Experiences that explore the tight grip language has on our ability to comprehend the world around us. And that's great, because ever since playing Inkel's Heaven's Vault all those years ago, I've found myself consistently enamored by this peculiar way of navigating that paleographical fog. The Apothecary of Trubiz is one such title, a game predominantly about mixing potions and correctly identifying the needs of your clientele from a sequence of symbols, and a textbook written in a script that you cannot initially pass. The journal tells you everything you need to know, of course, but your job is to make sense of these instructions. A combination of two reagents will grant you something new, but there are other techniques for brewing what you need that require some serious out-of-the-box thinking. Or rather, a sequence of educated guesses built off the back of some fairly pathetic diagrams in this apothecarial tome. This is a lot of fun, mixing cerebral taxation with a spot of trial and error, although sending the wrong potion to a patient might risk making them worse. No direct fail states here though. The game progresses whether you are successful or not, and sports a number of endings depending on your alchemical prowess. It also allows you to repeat your previous day should you feel like you can do better. The range of tasks required of you is meek, and in this I think the game grants you a reprieve, the limited scope being a blessing rather than a curse. By the time I reached the end of my first playthrough, I felt like I had tapped into the right level of grey matter that I wanted to use for a game like this, but feeling like there was still room to investigate further. The journal in particular is a great touch, because it never properly validates your decipherment. You're not selecting from a draft of words or phrases, you are writing them directly yourself, not simply a green tick, but an act for your own reference. It is a combination of experiential translation, ailments that are largely self-explanatory, especially when coupled with your patients telling you their symptoms, and a sort of intuition about the gaps in between. What results is a sort of didactic duality of design in how you work out how to treat your patients, something intimidatingly clever but at the same time generously instructive. A certain type of player will navigate this side of the game without ever truly translating anything, and that's okay, because it's part of the experience but not the point of it. This is a great one of these, shaking up the formula once more and offering something a bit different even when built within a somewhat familiar framework. There is this intangible quality in a particular gradient of indie games that I absolutely adore, one where it is clear that the developer has eyes bigger than their stomach, but somehow still strives to work through the inevitable indigestion. Valkyrie Saga is one such project, an expansive but rough around the edges semi-open world platformer that hits a perfect sweet spot for me, tapping into an expansive liminality and an expressive language set that I really love. Much like Metal Garden, the world you're engaging with here is bloody enormous, and quite intimidating to get your head around. But rather than evoking an oppressive purgatorial prison, here the expanse feels like a beacon of opportunity. The sense of scale to be found here is impressive, even without the context of your own limitations. It's got that Fumito Ueda level of enormity, towering citadels to be explored and eventually supplanted, micro-challenges littered throughout that reward exploration and platforming prowess, Valkyrie Saga's world is so deftly informed by the mechanics with which you navigate it, blessing you with an ever-expanding roster of abilities that slowly but surely shrink the scope of the spaces around you. The Valkyrie's moveset is extremely satisfying to use, a combination of jumps and attacks coalescing in ways that reminded me an awful lot of Pseudo Regalia, the movement tech platformer that I featured in a previous volume of Cool Games for a Fiver, albeit here that tone sits in the context of a less precise and more freeform environment. Even early in the game you'll find ways to navigate seemingly untenable climbs, and although clear from the get-go that you will need to build your abilities to be able to reach your goal at the summit, I was surprised at just how open the world became almost immediately. The visual clarity with which you understand what can and cannot be tackled with your current skills, inoculating you against futile efforts. Sometimes games like this struggle with maintaining a sense of spatial awareness, especially given the scale of these challenges, but here it's all very thoughtfully designed, and in spite of the many ways in which the game supports your goals, it's still quite a fair challenge, and beyond that, it's kind of weird in how it's built. You're essentially left to your own devices to work out how to achieve these goals. Esoteric conversations with biblically accurate angels give you hints of particular ascensions to attempt, but it all ultimately boils down to you, the player, taking the charge to fully explore your environment and bring sense and order to these disparate landmarks. This is good. I'm happy to give it the static canvas seal of approval, despite so far only experiencing a fraction of what it has to offer. Don't let the visual simplicity fool you, it's a whole mood, and another nice surprise for a modest price. Thank you for watching. If you like these cost-effective anthologies, I'm happy to keep making them, as well as expanding my thoughts on individual titles, so let me know in the comments which games piqued your interest the most, or that you want to hear more about. If you have any hot picks you would like me to cover in future videos, fire away. And until next time, whatever you do, make sure you put that fiver in your pocket to good use.